Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast this week featuring a friend of mine, Stephen Woessner. He's a marketer, an author, and a podcaster. He's got a daily podcast that he puts out each and every day. Stephen, that's a lot of work to do something like that.
It definitely is. I don't mean to laugh. I mean, it absolutely is. Although I have the luxury and good fortune of being able to walk up to the microphone and have a host an interview with a really interesting guest, and then when I'm done with the interview, I'm actually done. I have no responsibilities whatsoever downstream just because of my team. And so the only reason why we have a successful show, and it's been so consistent is because we have great guests and we have an incredible team. If it was all left up to me, it wouldn't happen.
The podcast, of course, called Onward Nation Podcast. So I wish I had that luxury. I wish I was able to just interview people and then hand it off to somebody else. But for me, it's a daily grind. It's like I set up the guests, I do the interview, and then afterwards got to do the production and then the post-production, then the uploading and all that stuff. But for me, that's the fun part.
Oh, well, so then it's a perfect fit, right? I mean, because you enjoy being able to pull all the levers and push the buttons and so forth. And so, well, that sounds like a perfect fit.
It absolutely is. So I wanted to talk to you about marketing because your main business is predictive ROI, and I know that you've written a couple of books, and we've talked countless times about that. But for a small business to market their brand, to get their name out there, and to start making money, how much in a ballpark does it cost to take a name from nothing and make it into not a household name, because that would take millions and millions of dollars, but make it a kind of a household name to basically hit the target market that they're looking to hit? Well,
gosh, I mean that's a difficult question, and it's difficult because it depends on the starting point of that business, it depends on the industry, it depends on the person. So there's a lot of different variables, and it also depends upon their goals. But I think that, and also kind of their wherewithal of how much work they want to do themselves. Do they already have a presence in social media? Do they not? Would they like to have one? Like, do they have the talent to pull that off? And if yes, and are they willing to invest a lot of time on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and whatever else? And, are they good on camera? Do they want to build a YouTube series? Or do they want to build a video show that's hosted exclusively on Facebook? So, there's a lot of different factors that play into that. But first, before we ever talk about, budget and return on investment, is really having a conversation about, where the business is at currently today. What are the conversion metrics like? How much website traffic produces X number of leads, which produces X number of proposals, which produces X number of closed opportunities for X dollar amount. Is being able to understand all of that math, and then being able to figure out, okay, well, if website traffic currently at 5,000 unique visitors or 10,000 unique visitors is currently producing all of this stuff downstream, what would it cost for us to increase that to 15,000 or to 20,000? What would it cost to, have that business owner get really, really clear about his or her point of view? And we turn that into a podcast, a YouTube series that drives traffic, leads, and sales. So, that's how we go about answering that question, as opposed to saying, it's a $50,000 budget or a $100,000 budget or a $250,000 budget. It really depends on actually math. I mean, that's why I named the business Predictive ROI, because we like to figure that kind of stuff out.
So, Stephen, how does somebody go about figuring out the math, knowing that 2 + 2 = 8 rather than the 4?
Yeah, so I think it's getting a good feel for the metrics that I just mentioned. In fact, last night I was having a conversation with a business owner who, he knows he wants to, he's already doing, over $1 million of revenue in his business. So, he's certainly not a newbie. He's been doing it for quite some time. And he's got a lot of experience in that category. But he's frustrated because he knows that there's more opportunity, but just doesn't know how to get it. And so, part of that is getting into Google Analytics, getting into Infusionsoft, his CRM, and understanding how much traffic produces how many leads, which produces how many proposals, which produces how many acceptances, and then understanding, that path, that customer journey, and then how we can influence that customer journey by putting more prospects at the top end of the funnel and then working that through. And so really like that stuff, those metrics right there, every business owner, should know what those metrics are for the business. And if they don't, that's the place to start.
Well, how do you figure out where to start then? How do you figure out what metrics you need to look at and what the breakdown of this number to that number to that number and what they mean?
Well, and so, I mean, the metrics that I just shared, not only are those the metrics, but I stitched them together in the chronological way that's the formula. So for example, let's say that a website is getting 5,000 unique visitors, on a monthly basis.
Right.
And they know that they're getting, 100 leads. So they know they're getting 100 leads through a website that's generating 5,000 unique visitors a month. So what is that, 5%? And no, it'd be less than that. It'd be 1%, 2%. And so now they know that they've got a conversion metric of website visitors produces X number of leads. And so then okay, well, let's follow that through. So out of those 100 leads, how many of those leads turned into actual conversations with our sales team? Well, let's say that 30 of them did. So 30%, so 30 of them converted into phone calls. Great. So then out of those 30, how many of them turned into proposals? Well, let's say that 50 did. Awesome. So now you've got 15, right? So you went 5,000 to 100 to 30, now at 15. Great. So we submitted a proposal 50% of the time. And then what percentage of those proposals, of those 15 proposals, were accepted? Well, maybe it's 50%. So 7. And so now with some level of certainty, and assuming that 5,000 traffic, those visitors coming into the top end was actually good quality, well, what would happen if we doubled that? What would happen if we actually took that to 10? Mm-hmm. Or what would happen if that client was an exhibitor at a trade show or had a book launch or had a podcast like what you do for your business, or maybe had a YouTube series? What are some of the ways that we can increase traffic? And then does everything else in that cascading waterfall hold true? And if it does, then it becomes a really interesting conversation, because then it's about accelerating traffic and everything else remains constant, and then sales go up.
So does traffic always mean more sales?
No, it certainly doesn't, because not every traffic source is the same. So, in this example of, 5,000 visitors, that could be from a highly targeted source. Maybe they have a partnership in a particular industry, or maybe they've been running trade press magazine ads, or maybe they did a collaboration with a partner on YouTube, and so, it depends on what the traffic source is. Mm-hmm. If they're getting about 60% of their traffic from organic, like from, Google or Bing or whatever, so they're getting 60% of their traffic from search, then that traffic pattern is relatively stable, and you can believe that it's relatively high quality, and so it's not going to be 5,000 visitors one month and, 100 visitors the next month. So you can make some, reasonable predictions off of that. But yeah, the quality of the traffic absolutely matters. I mean, running a Google AdWords campaign for untargeted keywords, bringing in a bunch of traffic that is not targeted, certainly serves you no purpose whatsoever. You increase traffic, but nothing else happens.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. Is buying spots or hits a good way to go? But if you're not targeting the right market, then that probably isn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, you always have to target the right market. And Google AdWords is a phenomenal advertising platform, as is Facebook. But, they'll certainly take you money. They will take your money, whether you plan out a properly planned campaign or not. You probably won't be back as a customer because you'll think it's the fault of the channel. But just like in traditional media, there are people watching, the radio, various TV programs. There are people listening to various radio programs. but it does matter what the creative and the targeting is. It absolutely does.
Now, when somebody targets, let's say, for example, a YouTube channel, I know that my kids watch a ton of YouTube. I know that you've got YouTube stuff that you put up there. My podcasts actually go to YouTube as well. I don't know how many people are watching the ones that I'm putting up there, but I know that the stuff that my kids watch, they always complain about the commercials. I wonder what the conversion rate is on a lot of the commercials that are running, in the YouTube stuff that my kids are watching, and how much stuff that actually turns over from those types of ads.
Yeah, I think that the way that the pricing model for YouTube ads is really more about like trying to blanket the universe. And I'm not suggesting this is a strategy for anybody, but it's typically like YouTube ads are so cheap and so inexpensive that you could essentially buy, quote unquote, a lot of airtime for not that much money.
Right.
And so companies that are, looking for big splashes, and so that their target audience is like, oh my gosh, I see that guy everywhere. That can be accomplished with a YouTube campaign for not that much money. So it's less about conversion and more about just huge awareness that something is kind of, been launched.
Just kind of making a big splash with the least amount of money that they can.
Right.
So you mentioned earlier about social media, and you went through and you listed Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and stuff. How important is it for a small business to have a grasp and have a handle on social media?
I think it depends on where their market is. You and I live in the great state of Wisconsin, in the city of La Crosse. And so if I'm a small business owner and I'm serving clients in La Crosse in a radius of wherever my office is, do I need to dominate Facebook? Well, the reality is no, you don't. If you're the business owner of a B2B professional services firm and you want to have a national presence, as I do. I want to have a national presence, even though I'm here in La Crosse, but we're serving clients from coast to coast. Do I want to have a presence on Facebook? Do I want to have a presence on YouTube and Instagram and, LinkedIn and so forth? Of course. So it really depends on where your backyard is and what those customers or prospects need from you. So if you're a small business owner and you're working with customers that are typically within a 5-mile radius of your physical location, then a hard copy mailed newsletter or an email newsletter or an in-person event or some sort of high touch type of thing, like a VIP experience or something, that probably makes more sense than having 10,000 followers on Instagram or 10,000 followers on Facebook, because those people could never buy from you even if they wanted to.
Which is the best social media avenue to go down? Because I know that you do a lot of stuff on Twitter, and I see you a lot on Facebook. And as a matter of fact, I saw you the other day just on LinkedIn. So those are the three that I use. I don't use it. I don't use Instagram. I think Snapchat's one of them. Is that considered a social media, or is that just a peer-to-peer thing?
No, it's definitely social for sure. And here again, I think, as far as the media mix, if you will, with social, it again really depends on the business in the industry that they're in. So if somebody is a local florist, do they need to have a rockin' awesome profile on LinkedIn? No. If they're looking to build a social following because they want to really increase their by phone orders because they want to ship more across the country, then they need to participate in the platforms that are super visual: Facebook, Instagram. So if they're here in La Crosse, Wisconsin, or in Illinois, and they want to be shipping their product to the West Coast or the East Coast or whatever, and serve people more beyond their local area, it doesn't make sense to really invest in photography and that kind of stuff to really get onto Instagram. Sure, of course it does. Or if they have special events where they're serving local, whether that's brides or whatever it might be, doesn't make sense to participate in Instagram and tie that into like local events at the shop. Absolutely. So, but LinkedIn would be a total dud for that because that's not who is there. Mm-hmm. But if you're a tax accountant and you've got thought leadership around how business owners can, save money on taxes, and you're serving, an audience outside of your local area, does it make sense to participate in LinkedIn? Absolutely it does.
Now, with your podcast and with your business, how often are things changing? How often does the world kind of change when it comes to marketing, when it comes to getting your word out, when it comes to, passing your message on?
I think it's changing. Well, I think there's small incremental changes that happen all the time. Mm-hmm. Whether that's with the platforms themselves, like, Facebook updated, this, or Instagram updated that, or now you have these new filters. I mean, that's happening daily, right? And so, it's difficult to obviously stay in front of that. So that's the first piece. As far as like bigger cataclysmic changes, I think that, those happen less often. People, I hear often about how, quote unquote, hot podcasting is and how new it is. And it's like ESPN was doing podcasts back in the late 90s, with SportsCenter was delivered as a podcast. And I'm like, there's nothing new about the technology. The adoption rate has certainly gotten to a fever pitch, but that happened. I mean, that started 5 years ago when iPhone 5 came pre-installed with the podcast app. I mean, that's why podcasts blew up. It was about distribution, not the platform or not the technology. So, do those things happen? Yes. Cataclysmic changes more slowly. Every single day, there's something that's new about something.
Well, I know that in your previous books, I know you have viral social networking and search engine optimization, and I'm guessing that you could probably rewrite both of those books, and they'd be completely different.
Well, yeah, and as in fact, just today we rolled out a new service offering, to do like website audits for clients, and I started off by saying, hey, way back in 2009, when I wrote the Small Business Owner's Handbook to Search Engine Optimization, SEO search was a lot more simple. Today, it's not. Mm-hmm. It's more complicated. It's changed a lot in the almost 10 years since I wrote that book. So, everything, I don't want to say everything in that book has changed, but probably 80% of it has. And then even just the title of the second book, the, increased sales through online or through viral social networking. Well, it's not even called social networking anymore. So, I mean, it's social media. In the early days when that book, came out, which was in 2011, it was often referred to as social networks. And they are still kind of networks, sort of, but they're really more platforms, communities. It's social media today, not social networking.
Stephen Woessner, my guest on the BS with Bob Schmidt podcast. Stephen, how does somebody go about finding you?
PredictiveROI.com is where all of our stuff is. So our podcast, all of our free resources, everything is there. The how to reach me is certainly there. You can find me on LinkedIn, of course. So those would probably be the two best ways.
Next week, part 2 of the BS with Bob Schmidt podcast, conversation with Stephen Woessner, author of the book Profitable Podcasting, Grow Your Business, Expand Your Platform, and Build a Nation of True Fans. We'll talk about that next week with Stephen Woessner.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com. And by Tri-State Sound and Light. Find them online at tristatesound.com. Tell your story with microcasts by podcastforhire.com. The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is a Podcast for Hire production.